Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode. Today, we're talking about reprogramming the mind. I've created this episode for you to have a number of tools and techniques to help you to reprogram your mind. So basically, reprogram or decondition what you don't want, and then to condition the mind, the habits, the patterns, the thought forms into alignment to what you do want. I'll be sharing a number of techniques and, of course, personal stories of how I've worked with these techniques, because I want to share things that are based on my own direct experience, because I have the most say in those. I have direct knowledge of those. So we'll be getting into what is reprogramming the mind and how does it work. It won't be too technical. I want to get more into the techniques. The techniques speak for themselves when practiced. So as I mentioned, reprogramming the mind is about getting out or deconditioning what we don't want. There's a number of different ways we can speak about the mind. The one that is most familiar to us in the West is the psychological model, of the conscious mind and the subconscious and unconscious. So many of us know that the conscious mind is but a sliver of the vast storehouse of energy and information that is the totality of our body-mind complex. From this small sliver, the conscious mind only has access to a small bandwidth of the total information. To give an idea of how little this is, think about how many things you can think about at once. How many digits of a phone number you can memorize. You have to work within this short-term memory bandwidth. You're, in some sense, serial processing. But the subconscious is parallel processing from a vast storehouse of information, which is the history of your acquired mind. The acquired mind is a Taoist term for the mind that is developed from your birth in this life, but also from the deeper parts of you, which are the DNA structure, or we could say the karmas, the past energy that has come over from previous birth. If you go into previous birth, I'm not asking you to believe or not believe in that aspect. Just know that what we're working with is from the past. The past leaves a pattern. That patterning is a repetitive way of thinking, being, and reacting and relating. We have a storehouse of programmed fears, phobias, attractions, and aversions. We are not a blank slate in each moment. We have a conditioned way of perceiving that biases the way that we look out into the world. We have prejudices, we have projections, we have all of these things, and as we become more conscious, we allow our consciousness to become conscious of our subconscious, bringing to light what was in the dark. So the process of deconditioning is to I was going to say control, delete, but that's not the exact term that would be most appropriate. Maybe we could control, shift, highlight, and delete large portions of our code that we don't use, that are no longer adapted to our current environment. Because the process here is, as we become more conscious, we want to align our mind with our vision, with our values. Not the values that were given to us from our early childhood, from our history, but we want to create our history. We want to write our story. And what values and virtues are most relevant, are most adapted for our given circumstances into the future for which we're calling in, for which we're creating, for which we're orienting our energies towards. Part of this process is the empowerment process of realizing that you are the conscious creator of your reality. Not just your mind and your body, but the whole course of your reality, of course, from a higher level of the mind, a higher level of knowing, a higher level of being. You are creating it all. At this level of mind, there is more responsibility. And when we accept that, we gain access to more power. Power is the decision making. Power is the choice that we have to choose how we react. Instead of reacting unconsciously, we can respond. This is the whole idea of responsibility. It's not a burden, it's a respondability. It's a greater freedom that we can express. So as we decondition the old patterns, we realize the limitations of our mind. We realize we're not just a little old self, a little old ego. The stories, the ideas we were told when we were very young were much, much, much more powerful, capable, connected. And there's no limitation to how far we can expand. So we're on this journey to continually open our mind. And when we're not in that process of deconditioning, we're conditioning the mind. What are we inviting in? What do we want to bring forth? What do we want to embody in this life? What archetypes do we want to embody? Which qualities or characteristics are most representative of our true self as expressed in each unfolding moment? So how do we decondition? How do we get this old stuff out? Once again, there's a number of systems, and I don't want to get too technical in explaining all of this. So I'm going to try to be brief in how I explain this. So I hope I give enough detail. I'm assuming a lot of people know this stuff, so I'm just going to be brief. Our thoughts create our body. The whole universe is mental. The great mind is God. They're one and the same. The universe is a thinking. It is one thought, one song. Universe, one song, one thought. And there are many perspectives, many thoughts. And from these individual perspectives and thoughts, we are creating life. Each individual is a separate aspect of the one. The one is the many, and the many is the all. So you come from energy into matter, from subtle to gross. And your thoughts influence your body. What you repeatedly think and say is what you become. Your body, your DNA, responds to the words that you say, the thoughts that you think. Now, you may not immediately, you can't say, I'm a golden bell and just zippity zap zap. There's a little bit more to it, which we're not going to get into. But there is a process of conditioning the mind by thinking new thoughts, by making new decisions, which changes our path. We still have to work with our current limitations of mind and a relationship with the universe, which is part of our journey. If every thought we had immediately manifested, most of us would get ourselves into a lot of trouble. I can speak for myself. Have you ever had like a thought like, oh, what would happen if I slipped and fell and da-da-da-da-da, and all of a sudden that would happen? So we get a little bit of grace that things don't happen immediately. This is a good thing. So there's a process. And what's really important when we start out this journey here together is getting to understand what we want. I always help people when I'm doing coaching work with them, and even when I'm working in my holistic medicine clinic, to get really clear on what someone's goal is, where they're orienting their mind, because this is very critical. This is the responsibility of being a conscious creator. If you have an idea of where you want to go, who you want to be, and how you want to act, this gives orientation. Orientation gives hierarchy. Hierarchy is an understanding of what is most important to you. If you know what's most important to you, it becomes clear what isn't important. And it becomes clear what old patterns are out of alignment. And the more you orientate towards what you want, that will become ever more lucid to you. And that's when you can see where the change needs to be made. Because the thing with our conditioned patterns is they're subconscious. We don't see them because it's like a fish in water. It's been in the water its whole life. It doesn't know it's in water. So as we get along on our conscious way, the more that we can orientate towards what we want, it'll be really clear what the limitations are. For example, as I'm working with my dream, I'm planning some trips next year. And with the current level of the limitations of my mind, I don't know how I can financially afford these. But I don't see that as a true block. It's a current limitation of my mind in my understanding of what's possible. And in that, I have a number of beliefs related to abundance, what I can create, what I can call in. And I have a number of limitations in my mind of how I think it has to go, because maybe it's not finances that I need. Maybe I'll meet somebody and by some other exchange, I'll get to where I want to go. So there's a way of working with the limitations and the conditioning we have, but the exploratory process is what I'm hallmarking here. The exploratory process is getting clear on what you want as a tool to determine what you don't want and what you're already choosing in your life, which is keeping you caught in those cycles or in an old identity. So the more clear that we can determine what we want and what we don't want is really important. One of the scaffoldings that I work with quite extensively is the chakra system. And this is 7 different dimensions of reality, which are an energetic scaffolding for your emotional, physical, and mental body. And though they have very multi-dimensional aspects at each level, in brief, they're to do with the finances, one-on-one relationships, and sexuality. That's like one compartment there. Empowerment in your process of power. This relates to like diet and exercise, decision making. Your love, decisions about love. Communication and expression. The higher mind, as in your mind and your relationship to mind and goals. And then your relationship to the all, or God, or creator. And that's an excellent scaffolding because each of those categories has a lot of beliefs in and around it. We all inherit beliefs about money and abundance and finances. We all have many lifetimes of conditioning in the superego, in our past, in our society, about sex and about power and about love and about whether it's safe to communicate, whether we were raised as an early child in a household where it was safe to express emotions like anger or sadness, or where we were free to speak our truth about what we believed about God. Do we believe in God? So there's belief structures that are fundamental to the way that you perceive reality and the way that you navigate it. I have fundamental beliefs that the universe supports me in my highest path. And that any limitation of my mind, whether that's based on financial capabilities at a current moment in time, whatever it might be, I know that that's a limitation of my mind. That's baggage I'm carrying that at some point I can let go of when I've done the work to reprogram my mind, when I'm seeing the truth, when I know the truth, because the higher truth are these fundamental laws. And there's a number of different people who have extrapolated them quite lucidly, like Arnold Patent. You can look them up. Arnold Patent's Universal Laws. He speaks very clearly about the laws of the universe and how he basically shows a amazing It's like 30 points or something of just basic truths. And of course, with any truths, especially read on the internet, please verify them from your own experience. But it gives a great developed understanding that most of us weren't given when we were young, through our churches, through our schools. And it's nice to have that scaffolding there with which to weigh our limitations, weigh our current beliefs. So I think I've spoken enough, depending on who you are and how new you are to reprogramming the mind. Let's just give like a little conclusion of what I've spoken to here. So we have a mind, different levels of the mind from conscious to subconscious. Our conscious mind is what we're currently perceiving, and it's a small bandwidth of this larger body-mind complex, this interrelationship of body and mind. And in this, there is the subconscious. The subconscious has a reservoir of stored thoughts and beliefs, prejudices and phobias and fears and likes and dislikes and attractions and aversions. And these are filtered into, like, before we even perceive things, the subconscious is filtering the information and relaying it to the conscious mind. This is why the subconscious is so powerful, because it's filtering the information, and it takes up about 99.9% of the total bandwidth. Is that the right computer term? The total storage. Would that be RAM? I don't know computers that well. So random access. Okay, I'm not going to go into that. RAM stands for... Okay, I did go into that. I'm not going to go into that further. So we reprogram the mind through conscious repetition, determining what we want, releasing what we don't not want, releasing the old stories, releasing the old patterns of energy in the body. So we haven't touched on this, but it's important. So let's go here. Your beliefs, your emotions, and the past is your body mind. If you look at somebody, you can see how they've been living. Your actions that you repeatedly do, how you stand, how you walk, what you do with your body, is how you look. That's really clear. Same with your emotions. If you hold a lot of anger, it becomes visible to someone with their third eyesight, but it does become visible in some sense in the body, because when we hold a lot of negative emotion, it blocks up the system. Now, this isn't a view that's completely universal, especially in the Western world, but among many holistic systems, such as traditional Chinese medicine, which I study, Ayurveda, many indigenous systems, we hold emotions in the body because the emotions are processed in the body. If they're not processed and expressed and moved through the system, they get blocked in the system. The Chinese medicine theory is that different organs, particularly 5 major yin organs, are primary processing plants of the 5 acquired emotions of anger, sadness, worry, fear, and anxiety. And then there are derivations of that, such as anger is also similar to frustration, and etc., etc. And there are also, of course, positive emotions that get processed, etc. But it's mostly the negative emotions that we're concerned about, because most people experience their positive emotions without resistance. And when you experience an emotion in its totality, it moves through you. The energy of that emotion moves through you. Positive emotions are typically uplifting, so we experience them. We receive that energy. It feels good generally due to the nature of it being positive, whereas negative emotions generally pull the body down or tighten it or contract it. And we, depending on who we are, we don't experience them. We don't always experience them to their totality. We hold them in. This might be for safety. This might be because it's not appropriate to release them in a certain work environment. And if we store them and we don't express them, maybe we've been taught at an early age not to express anger, and we have a, perpetual or potentially, a lifetime of suppressed anger because we never were taught it's okay to express it. This builds up in the system. In the Chinese medicine system, this would be processed primarily by the liver, and this would block up the liver qi. This could affect the liver directly, but everything is holistic, so everything affects everything else. So it may affect different parts of the body depending on how you're choosing to suppress that anger. Anger typically, it's a little different for everyone, is suppressed by clenching the jaw, tightening the throat, shoulders, and fists. It's a common pattern energetically where people will hold suppressed anger. So if you clench your jaw, this might be something in your system that just an encouragement to take further assessment in. There are a number of different conditions and held emotions and states that can create that clenching of the jaw, but anger and withheld frustration is a very common one that I see very often. So when we have these blocked emotions, they take form in the body. They affect the body, as well as our beliefs. As an easy way to think about this, flexible body, flexible mind. Rigid body, rigid mind. You can see it quite easily in many people who are quite rigid in their beliefs. They typically have very stiff bodies. Whereas people who practice a lot of yoga or are very expressive in their dance typically are a little bit more open. It's not always just like that because it's a little bit more specific, because some people are very rigid about certain things and very flexible about others, so it's not a perfect comparison, but in general it's a finding. So our body, our emotions, and our mind is represented in the energy, which is just like the word I'm using to talk about all three of those. So we can release that energy from the system. That is the old conditioning. And this will help us to create openness and availability for new programs, new patterns. So that old energy can release, and that's part of the work, and then inviting in the new energy or cultivating the new energy, the new virtues. Okay, let's get into the meat and the bones. So key times to reprogram the subconscious are morning and night. Let me say that again. Key times to reprogram the subconscious are morning and night. This is because when you sleep, you go into a more subconscious state and unconscious state, depending on the sleep cycle that you're in. When you're in your waking state, you're in your conscious mind. It's quite simple, right? So as you wake up, you're coming from your subconscious into your conscious, and your conscious mind doesn't have a lot of stuff going on. You don't have a lot of stimulation to process in your day. You haven't gone to work. You haven't seen a bunch of advertising. Hopefully you haven't turned on your phone after 5 minutes in the morning. That's a death sentence in terms of subconscious programming. And what happens is you kind of have as close to a blank slate as you get, which is when we wake up. There's an openness, there's an availability to really orient where you want your mind to go and who you want to be. Because as soon as you go off, maybe you put on your work clothes, maybe you do a similar routine, maybe you go right to work, or you see somebody, immediately will tend to go into the old patterns, because it's like walking in the snow. Once you've walked a path, it's just easier. And the mind is always going towards that point of what's easiest, because it uses the least amount of energy. So we work on our habits. So as soon as you wake up, you might have an identity as Joe Schmo, who does, I don't know, maybe you're a doctor, Joe Schmo the doctor. But as soon as that's all an identity, and that's all a bunch of patterns that you've cultivated. I'm not saying they're good or bad patterns, but this is what's in the programming. Now, if you want to create new patterns, It's important to develop a level of consciousness, especially in that first hour, that's going to set a momentum for you. And the same thing as you go to bed, you're transitioning from conscious mind, all of those patterns of the day. There's an opportunity to let them go. Because if you're holding on to those patterns of the body and the emotion and the mind, they're going to consolidate in the night. It's easy to talk about in terms of the physical body. So I did a lot of work in construction, and then I was a dental hygienist, and I've done a lot of work with my body. And when I work all day and I don't stretch my body out and relax the tensions, they build up, and then my body forms to fit the activities that I'm doing. And this can be very beneficial in some sense, but it can also lead to repetitive strain and wear and constructing the fascia in a way that's not in the highest alignment. If I release the tensions in my body every day with yogic practice, stretching, and meditation, I can, in some sense, not retain so much of the weight and the stress from the day. And a lot of the conditioning and the routine that gets built into the system, which doesn't create as much freedom, because a lot of this is my experience of any type of repetitive work, it becomes repetitive to a point of boredom when it's built into the system and the system knows it well. So it's not novel in any sense. But when my body is much more free and open, flexible, and doesn't have that conditioning, then activities are much more novel. They're not so built in, and there's more freedom because the habit of the mind is to get lazy. Say I'm shoveling, and I'm shoveling every day. The body will build itself in and around shoveling so that certain muscle groups will be much more conditioned to fire in a certain way. And then what typically happens is people begin to shovel in a pattern, and then they repeat this pattern over and over. But if I release my fascia every night, I'm much more available and open to, maybe I'll switch my hands and exert more creativity. Or maybe I'll decide to shift my hips and how I move and swivel and rotate from my core, or how I stabilize with my legs. So there's this process of not retaining the weight of the day, the burdens that we take on. This is metaphoric and figuratively. And the night is such an important time to release those tensions. This is both physical and mental, to release your problems, your current limitations of mind. To then not only release, but also to orient. Like, what are you calling in? The last few things you think about before bed, you may have noticed this, you probably dream about them. You're much more likely to dream about them. Which means your subconscious mind is working with that. If you have problems with your business, with your marriage, pray about those or set an intention to work on those right before bed. And your subconscious will continue to work on them all night with a vast amount of intelligence, more so than you can do in your conscious thinking process. So those key morning and night periods are so important. And I'm going to go over a few things here, but I'm just going to drop in that when you want to condition your body or decondition it, it's best to do this. Have a strong intention. Be specific if you can. Be with other people or a collective environment or any kind of environment that is conducive to what you're cultivating. Write it down or visualize it. Speak it out loud. Act it out. Pray about it. And move your whole body to really embody what you're calling in. Even if you're not calling in something physically embodied, move your whole body and breathe. Conscious breath, breathe. And the rest of the episode is basically going to break down all that. So let's go over some of those things. Intention. Your intention is the starting point for your mind to orientate around. Orientate. I say that word quite a bit, and I don't know what's right or wrong. Orient sounds more correct. So for you to orient your mind around, as I mentioned in the beginning, there was thought, and the word was, I don't know how that Bible verse goes, and the word spoke over the waters, and there was light and dark. I'm going to have to read Genesis again. So intention matters. Intention, in some sense, precedes thought, because you can have good or bad intentions. It's like a polarization. This is how we create karma. It's based on our intention, not our action. So our intention will guide our thinking process. So if we have a good intention, it will guide good thoughts. So when we have the good thoughts, it'll influence the emotional. The influence of the emotional will take place at the level of the endocrine, at the level of the physical, which will affect blood chemistry, which will affect how we physically feel. It'll affect the whole physical system, the DNA, what is created in the body, whether that's sickness or health. It'll create a momentum, an energy in the body, which will drive the system and its neurobiological mechanisms. Your intention and your thinking matters. And the more clear and developed you can think, the easier your life will be. And this is why I mentioned the whole chakra system, because we want to be able to organize our mind and our intentions. Because if we're looking to release old beliefs about finances and plan our dream life, and that might take managing relationships that we have and love and communicating and expressing, that's a whole lot to work with, right? This is why I have a coaching system where I write all of this stuff down. I'm really clear on it, so I have direct intentions that address all these different aspects and dimensions of life. Writing it down was another one that I mentioned. It's really important. Not that everyone has to do it, but it's a very effective strategy. I didn't use it for years. Once I started using it, it helped me a lot. It gets things out of the mind. Like, I know many people struggle to clear their mind, especially before bed. A very effective strategy that I know works for people is to write things down. Instead of the thoughts just like bouncing around, because your mind is trying to help you. It's trying to do a good thing. It's like, hey, remember this. Hey, remember this. And if we write it down, the mind's like, okay, he knows. She knows. Doesn't always take it right out. But in general, it works really well. Another fun one on writing. When I was in my early 20s, I wanted to make a big change. I was in a bunch of patterns that I didn't like. I didn't have a lot of virtue. I had some struggling relationships with women. I had a partner at the time. It was kind of like, it was a little rough. It's working out a lot. It's very selfish. So I'd been writing for a number of years. Just like journaling. At that time, I didn't share any of my writings with people. I just wrote in notebooks. And I created this character named Desmond. Desmond is a homage from the TV show Lost. Not that it's like anything to do with him, but it was just from, I like that name. And Desmond was everything that I wanted to be at that time, but wasn't doing yet. So I had short hair at the time, and I had this idea, because I didn't have long hair since I was a kid, that I would grow my hair out and I would be more into arts and poetry. Because at the time I was short hair, I was a jock, I was working out all the time, I was drinking coffee, and Desmond drank tea. So I created this character and I formed him. I could see him in great detail in my mind of who this person was that I wanted to be. And I began to integrate characteristics from Desmond. I would write about the stories of what Desmond would do. Desmond did this, and Desmond did this, and Desmond likes this. And this gave my mind this play to be able to see a life that I didn't have to like, it felt available. It felt really easy to play with that. And it felt effective. And it was effective. My ex at the time was very supportive of it most of the time. But sometimes I would get into the mind where I would be like, Desmond does this. So I would constantly like talk about this imaginary character that I created. And then she would get into it too. She'd be like, I think Desmond would do this. And I'd be like, you're right. And then at other times she's like, you got to stop with the Desmond stuff. Which is fair. But it really helped me at that time. So, if you're a writer, that might be an effective strategy for you, even if you're not a writer. But it worked really well for me being a writer. So getting really clear on your intentions. Now you can set those in the morning. You could write them all down. This isn't just a to-do list. When I do my coaching system, here's a number of things that I put on there. I write Aya Om, which is not only the name of my business, but it's my name and then the pranava, the cosmic sound. So I'm harmonizing my vibration with the Om. And the Om is a technology. It has 3 parts. A, U, M. They vibrate the lower, middle, and upper dantian, or all 3 parts of the spine and body, so that I'm calling into presence. I'm vibrating my whole system in harmony with my name, in harmony with what is known as the cosmic vibration or sound. So it's a technology. And the more I consciously repeat this is a prayer in some sense. Codified within my business is all the things that I'm about to list now, which are the major areas in my life that I focus on. So I usually write these down or have them written down and I check in on them, such as cultivating divine love, my path of mastery in Qigong, yoga, breath work, my path in Sweat Lodge, my path with ayahuasca, etc. There's about 20 of these things, including abundance and family, all the things that I want to check in with. And then I have my virtues and my embodied values. So this is discipline, purity, equanimity, self-study, self-surrender, and humor. I have virtues, love, compassion, courage, wisdom, faith. And these are things that I check in with in the morning, and I can also I don't always do it in the evening, but it's a great strategy as well to check in with the evening as to how I effectively or ineffectively embodied these. And then I have a number of other things, such as my 7-step coaching system, which I'm not going to break down here, but it goes into the 7 chakras, the 5 negative emotions, and a number of other systems integrated into one system, such as the yin and yang theory, etc. So if you want information on that, I do send out a free scaffolding that people can use to get to know how I organize my mind and my coaching system. It's a very easy to follow along with. You fill it out, you put your dreams in there, you put your values, what's most important to you, and you can take those first steps on your own if that feels like something that you want to initiate yourself into. What's important with your intention is that there's depth to it. And what I mean by depth is, if we want to reprogram our subconscious, we don't simply just say it. Like, one of the techniques I use is to repeat my intentions over and over like a mantra. I am abundant. I have everything I need when I need it. I am abundant. I have everything I need when I need it. I am abundant. I have everything I need and I need it. And repetition is important, but the depth of repetition, the depth of intention is more important to me. Meaning that if I just say it once and I wholeheartedly say it with my body, mind, and emotion, that's when it actually reaches into the subconscious. That's the depth I'm talking about. This isn't just rote. This isn't memorization. This isn't repetition without fully embodying it. You want depth to what you're doing. So you actually have to believe, and you actually have to put a little energy behind what you're saying. How do you cultivate that energy? Well, if you're really clear on your dream and why it's important to you, why it's in alignment with your value structure, then you'll have some energy behind it. What I mean by that is we all have values, once again, conditioned values, and we have values that we're conditioning in. The more clear that we can elucidate what's important to us and why it's important, the more we will be able to make those decisions, and we'll make those decisions easily. Because we're making decisions, though we don't realize it, because we have values and conditioned beliefs that we're not aware of because they're in the subconscious, and we don't realize why our value structures are like that until we consciously go in and get to know them. Many people make decisions in life, as an example, because they think it's the safest and most viable option for them, say financially. But if they actually broke down why they thought that, there's a capacity we have. So like, I did a job that I didn't love that paid pretty well. Now, at a certain time, I had a belief that that's safe. And many people have the belief that they're in the safe job because it has a pension or it has cutbacks of, whatever it might be. I reorganized my mind to see that I'm not happy in this job. I'm not thriving. I'm not showing up. It takes a lot of extrinsic motivation for me to show up. It is more important. It is of a higher value to me that I do something I love, which is going to provide me with more energy and more motivation. See what I did? I had to see all the beliefs that I thought, and I had to organize my mind around the new belief structure that's in alignment with what I want, and I had to organize why it's important. I had to see the value of it. And that creates a certain depth because it's coming from within. It's coming from what's important to me. And I can pull from that energy, and it does take pulling. It might come easy some days, but when you wake up every day and you have to work against the old conditioning, and depending on how old you are and how much conditioning you have and what kind of conditioning it is, it might be a lot of resistance. It might be a lot of work to get past, especially the initial hump of clearing some of that conditioning from the body. Remember, this is all held in the body. The years that I worked that job that I didn't love built up a reservoir of negative emotion, especially suppressed anger and frustration at myself, because every year that I continued to work that job, I carried more of the karmic debt in my body of the stress, of resistance, of not wanting to be there, of the workload, of all the avoidance patterns that I was using to help to cope with the suppressed emotion because I wasn't doing what I loved. Every year that built up a frustration of, I'm still in this. Why didn't I choose something different? Why didn't I do something better? This was revealing all the programs of how I am hard on myself as well. So when I started making the change and actually doing the inner work to reprogram, I had to have all that emotion come up. And I had to work with all that anger and frustration and see all those beliefs and how hard I was on myself for not doing what I really loved back then. And I had to find forgiveness for myself. So this is all part of the reprogramming process. So we were at depth of intention and specificity. So getting really clear on what it is you want, why you want it, why it's most valuable, why it's most important, why it's most safe. And this will allow you to make the changes and not take huge risks. Huge risks that are unnecessary in some sense. Like when I first moved to Squamish 4 years ago, I took a risk to quit my job, and I expected the universe to provide for me. Because you've heard those stories, right? Someone's like, I didn't want to do it anymore, so I did what I love. I booked the ticket and the universe just provided. And I heard that and those kinds of stories, and I was like, fuck yeah. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to do what I love. So I did, moved to where I wanted to go, and it didn't all work out in the way that I wanted it. The universe did provide, but it didn't provide me financially. Provided me what I needed, which is the definition of abundance, having everything you need when you need. But I lost a lot of money over the next 6 months because I couldn't pay for anything because it didn't work out in the way that I wanted. But what happened is I had an initial energy behind it. I had a good intention. The universe perhaps could have provided, but as soon as I moved, I went into a complete stress response. And the belief systems I hadn't actually switched over. You can make that kind of change if you can sustain the belief structures that are needed to support it. I couldn't. I went into fear. I went into old programs. I went into scarcity. I spiraled down in many senses and had a dysregulated nervous system, and it was hard to do the inner work for those first few months because I was so thrown off. So it's important to get really clear on the new structure of mind and the beliefs and the values, why they're important, and to make decisions in accordance with what you're willing to move forward in confidently. And there's a way to do this with grace. So you might be someone who can just quit their job, move across the world, and trust if your belief systems support that. You have to be able to work with your mind and what you're willing to come up against, and even what you're willing to sacrifice for. Because I've made decisions since then that my belief systems have been challenged, but I was willing to sacrifice. I was like, I want this bad enough that I'm going to do it, and I might have to pay for it later. So these are all equations we can make when we're consciously choosing what we want. Because that in itself is a decision to condition a new belief. Because if I make a decision where I'm like, I'm going to pay for this later, perhaps I'm willing to sacrifice for it, I'm conditioning a quality of faith and a quality of resilience, maybe even a quality of stupidity. But I'm cultivating those in a conscious way. And this is our journey as to what we want to create with our life. How are we writing our story? When I write my story, it's an adventure. Especially the last 4 years, but the last 6-7 years have been very bold in relationship to the previous years before that, which were much safer. So let's get back to the list here. Important to work with the environment. If you want to be a professional skateboarder and you live in Wisconsin, actually, I don't know anything, but I assume Wisconsin doesn't have a skateboarding community. That's huge. Maybe it does. But pick your favorite area that doesn't have a skateboard community. It's going to be best, chances are. It's going to be most easy, chances are, if you surround yourself in an environment that's most conducive. I don't know if it's still this way, but if you want to be an actor back in the day, you go to Hollywood. There are certain environments which are supportive of certain energies. If you want to be a yoga teacher, maybe go to India. It's pretty sensible, right? But this doesn't have to be your environment, though collective environments of people is one of the best ways to be supportive of new belief systems, is the whole vibe of the community. But changing your home environment to be more reflective of who you want to be. Like a lot of the stuff in our house says homes, apartments, sheds, wherever we may live, holds a memory that's like our body. I believe it was Jung that said the highest level of psychic integration is when internal and external match. Your home is an extension of you and the things that you own. So just like we hold a memory in the body of our karma or an energy or samskaras or habit patterns, so too the objects in our home, in the shape of our home, not just meaning like the physical shape. Most of us lived in rectangular homes, not circular homes, but the general things that are in your home create the energy of the environment. And sometimes we want to build momentum with our change. So we change our hair, we change our body, we work out, we do yoga, and we change our environment, our home. We bring in new life, maybe some new plants. What you can do around your shift, around your change, is you set intentions and you do actions. These actions, the cutting of the hair, these actions are contributing. They are your prayer. They are part of ceremony. Ceremony here, in its simplest form, is a conscious and intentional act or process of doing just what we're talking about, releasing something and inviting in. If you do actions and you do it in a ritual way or a beautiful way, there's an energy that's cultivating that adds to this. Because in some sense, we're just trying to, actually trying to is not the right word, we're just proving to ourselves that we're done with the old pattern. Because there's some sense in which we are the highest mind. We are God. We're capable as a conscious creator to just shift into a new dimension. We're always doing that anyways. But for us and the process of life is that we need to earn it. We often need to go through enough experience that teaches us that we're worthy or that we're not an imposter. So we have to go through a number of rituals or initiations that allow us to shift the system over, a number of repetitions, a number of different acts. And the more acts you can do, there is a sense at which there's a certain amount of repetitions that are necessary for certain things. But once again, I'm more concerned with depth than simply repetitions, but they're both important. So creating ceremony around it. Maybe that's a ritual for a certain amount of days. Maybe it's lighting a candle every day in the morning and praying with it. Whatever it might be. You know, there are many ways to pray. One of the ways that I learned to pray is to ask the universe, ask God, whatever you relate to as the all principle, the absolute principle. And don't simply ask as if it's an entity outside of yourself. It's just a higher perspective of what you are. And you're not currently perceiving it because you're choosing to experience from the separate self, from the individual self. You're choosing to have this experience as the all, represented as an individual. And you can ask for what you want. And if you ask for it, you're also offering. So you're not just asking proverbial mommy and daddy in the sky. You're asking and you're offering. You want your soulmate? What are you willing to offer? Who are you willing to be that is the person that's capable of calling in or attracting that quality of mate? And not only to give and receive, but also to trust. If you have a goal, you want your business to be in 2 countries and make $1 million in 10 years, whatever it might be. Can you visualize it and see it? Not so important to visualize it and know it as it will come, but get the sense for what it would feel like and to fully trust how it feels in the moment with gratitude as if it's already happened. And then to act in accordance with it already happening. So when I made that initial move, when I wanted my business to go to Squamish and I wanted to move there, I had this intention, I want this. And then immediately when it didn't go my way, I went into panic mode, nervous system dysregulation. I lost sight of that vision, and then I went into reactivity and stress. What I could have done was focused on my vision and what I wanted every day, and I could have kept focusing on it and acted in accordance, trusting the universe, and I would have saw the opportunities that the universe was giving for me. But when I was too caught in the stress state, my mind was like a spotlight. I was missing those opportunities. I was recoiling and isolating. I was coping. I wasn't thriving. I was surviving. So that's the difference, and that's a way to pray. I believe that's from the Book of Thomas, which is a biblical book that was taken out of the main Bible when certain individuals had a council and edited it several hundred years ago. So that's a way to pray. There are many other ways to pray, and in some sense, meditation is prayer. It's more the listening portion than the talking portion, but meditation is prayer in that sense, and meditation is reprogramming. You're much more able to see the programs of your mind if you simply witness them. Instead of engaging with the thought process, you're able to be a witness to it, be beyond it. And you can do mantra repetition. It could be conscious repetition in your native tongue. It could be Sanskrit or Pali mantras, which have a certain vibrational quality that harmonizes the system and have integrated in them a kind of wisdom that goes beyond simply the knowledge of what the words mean. So there's many ways to pray with meditation, and then embodied dynamic meditation such as yoga and qigong are par excellence. As mentioned, your whole body carries the memory, and you, as you walk through reality, have a field of intention and thought and emotion that you're cultivating, that is being created, and you carry this around you. And when you walk through the world, you have all these triggers from old past patterns, and you're influenced by marketing and other people if you allow them, if you're reflexive, if you're not clear and intentional about what you want. And the more that you can cultivate an energy around you and have a clear vision of who you want to be, how you want to walk and talk and stand and act, and what your virtues are, you can embody those no matter what the circumstances are, so that circumstances no longer dictate the course of your reality as it is when you're conditioned and unconscious. The more you're conscious, the more you control your life force through the breath, through your mind, through your intentions, the more you determine your walk through life, and you will see the opportunities that the universe is affording you. So your breath and your embodied practice is so essential. This is why I practice every morning, every night. Embodied practices, full body practices. This is yoga. This is qigong. I do exercise. I do other things that move my physical body, but I love martial arts and jiu-jitsu. I love yoga and qigong because they get you in your toes, they get you in your nose, they get you in your perineum. They're very extensive about getting your consciousness in every cell, breathing into your whole body. It's not just leg day. It's entire physical, emotional, spiritual body day. That's one of the reasons why I like them. In terms of spiritual process and reprogramming the mind, because of their depth. Remember, we're getting into the subconscious. The subconscious is deep, and we want to be able to work with it in an intelligent way. And I think it's kind of like a little diminutive to say that the spiritual traditions of yoga and qigong are just systems of reprogramming the mind, because I feel like that puts a ceiling on it, because it just feels like a little falling short. But in many senses they are. They're not just that, but they're ways to reprogram the mind and awaken to the possibility beyond mind. And that's where the ceiling is higher than simply reprogramming the mind at the level of mental. But they are absolutely intelligent systems, such as the 8 limbs of yoga, which are an exploration into your external conduct, your internal conduct of values, your body, your breath, your capacity to withdraw your senses, to be in meditation or concentration as well, and to develop a deep relationship with your soul and your center, that you're in a state of samadhi or deep absorption, which is like a self-hypnosis. And when you're in a deep self-hypnosis, which is what a lot of meditation is, you're in your own mind program instead of the programs you inherited or the cultural conditioning of the world around us. Because I don't know if you noticed this, but a lot of the government and society and the cultures and the people who run the world, this is just not the conditioning that I want. So if that's true for you, the more developed your personal practice is to reclaim your mind and to be in your center, the more power you have. Your energy, your consciousness, your capacity to consciously breathe, that's your empowerment process. So, let's do a review. Reprogramming your mind involves releasing what we don't want, old conditioning. Conditioning comes from our early childhood, from our society, from our culture, from our DNA, from our past, from our karma. Most important is, what do we want? What are we orienting towards? Our values, our virtues, our goals, our dreams, our highest aspirations. How do we do this in an intelligent way? We get really clear about all of those things. We write them down. We determine what we want at all levels and dimensions of our being, and then we practice it every conscious moment we possibly can, because you want to evolve or bring light to every aspect of your being. You shine the light of your consciousness into your own subconsciousness. This is inner work. Yes, the most important times are morning and night, but it develops into a conscious process, which ideally comes into every breath, every act, every thought. And the quicker you can get there, the more empowerment to you. What's important here? Your intentions. Your intentions create the karma. Your intentions set in motion the mind. Your mind creates the body. Your mind gives momentum to the life energies. How you take in the breath, how you take in your intentions, this is your responsibility. Your ability to respond to life. Because circumstances don't matter as much as you choosing your state matters. This is your destiny. Your destiny is not written in the stars, or maybe it is, but the most important destiny is written in the choices that you make. So, be specific. Have depth to your intentions. Repeat your intentions. Let it be your mantra. Focus on it. Wear a prayer bracelet. Whatever you need to do to call in constant awareness to your prayer. There was a period when I went to festivals, and then for a few weeks after, where I carried a kettlebell with me everywhere. Some people like prayer beads. I wanted an anchor to my prayer so that I couldn't forget. A 25-pound kettlebell is easy. It's not easy to forget what your prayer is, because you're always remembering, hey, I got a 25 kettlebell I got to carry everywhere. So I've done a lot of this. I've done a lot of conscious repetition. I have everything I need when I need it. I have everything I need when I need it. I have everything I need when I need it. Especially when things aren't there when you need it. When that happens, that's when I can bring up a lot of emotion. I have everything I need when I need it. I have everything I need when I need it. Crying, tears, anger, frustration. Let it all come out. Body work, healing sounds, qigong, extensive yoga, breath work, breathing into the tensions. Remember, all the karma, all the energy, all the stuck energy and old emotion, the old stories, they're built into the programming of how you hold your body, your mind, how you breathe, how you act, how you speak, how you fuck. You want to change everything about you. You want to look 20 years in the future. Do you want to be those patterns? Who do you want to be? How does that new individual want to act? Who's the highest aspiration? Who's your highest potential? And can you embody more and more of that energy now? How can you release that old stuck energy in the body? How can you build the system faster, stronger, mobile, flexible, in body and mind? Write this stuff down. Maybe write about Desmond or whoever your dream archetype story is. Write your dreams out. You are writing your story anyways. Might as well write it out on the paper. Or maybe you're a poet. Maybe you're a singer. Sing it out loud. Visualize it. Speak it. Share it with somebody. Maybe your closest confidants. Maybe put it online. That can raise the stakes up a little bit. Sometimes when I make big decisions, I put it out online so it's out there for the world to see. Pray about it. Use a drum. Put yourself in a trance. Self-hypnosis. Do a ceremony about it. Your own ceremony. Psilocybin ceremony. Whatever it might be. Come do some breath work. Come do ceremony. How do you release the old? This is a daily process. It's happening with every breath. You're always releasing. You're always inviting in every breath cycle, every day cycle, every year cycle. How can you make ceremony of life? How can you pivot from where you are to where you want to go? And always, always listen to your breath. It's such a powerful guide. If you have any questions on the information that was shared today, I offer breathwork, medical qigong, yoga, holistic coaching system, ceremonies, all the things that I've been speaking about. I am writing a book on most of this stuff in great detail, and I have many free forums, such as coaching forums with the scaffoldings that I'm sharing about, breathwork forums for daily practice you can have. I have a host of different podcasts on this subject. If you haven't checked out my channel, lots of YouTube stuff. I appreciate you listening. Thank you for listening, and have a great day. Aya Om.